The Infinity Conquest is now open, and later today, starting at 5 p.m. Central, I will be competing in Marvel Snap Conquerors, hopefully doing well and earning many of you that voted for me that coveted Spectrum variant. To prepare for this, not only have I been playing a ton of Conquest on my live stream up until this point, but I've also been sifting through tons of data on untapped.gg, trying to figure out what's going on, what are the best decks, ideas to counter those decks. And today's video is going to be talking about the culmination of all of that work. Let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting with the best of the best deck, this Thanos control pile. I have this titled simply best deck because per all of the metrics, whether it's win rate or popularity, this is definitely the best known deck in Conquest as we head on into the Infinity Conquest. The important thing to note is decks like this one ramp up in popularity the more competitive the Conquest queue gets. This deck is about 6% of untapped recorded games in the Proving Grounds. It's about 9% of recorded games in Silver. It was over 13% of recorded games in Gold, and I would bet that this deck will break 20% by the time Infinity Conquest is wrapping up later this week. This is the deck where if you're looking to just play something really powerful, this is the deck to be playing. Professor X and Spider-Man are really powerful lockout cards, especially when you accelerate them out a turn early with Psylocke or Thanos' Time Stone. The big thing this deck is looking to do is it's taking risks with its Professor X's that it plays as early as turn 4, because you have cards like Jeff the Baby Landshark, Claw, and Blue Marvel to add extra power into your Professor X path after the fact, should you guess a little bit wrong and not be winning when you slam it down on 4. You then deploy Spider-Man on turn 5 to lock up another path, and it's just good to go from there. This deck doesn't have super high cube equity, meaning a lot of the time your opponents are going to know when they're beat, so you're going to be winning a lot of 2 and 4 cube games, but this deck is very good at winning those 2 and 4 cube games. I genuinely don't think this deck has any atrocious matchups in the format, which means it's also the place you really want to be in a format like Conquest. There isn't a single tech card that shuts this down. There's things like Echo or Enchantress or Rogue that can like be useful against what this deck is doing, but none of them are an auto win like tech cards can often be into particular decks. After the King, the number 2 deck heading into Infinity Conquest this week's a little bit murky. There's a lot of decks that have similar play rates and win rates on Untapped, but personally, if I was asked to pick out a number 2 archetype in the field right now, I think it would definitely be some iteration of this Zabu Darkhawk strategy. This build featuring Stature and Black Bolt at its top end is a more traditional build. However, there's a lot of variation in what this archetype looks like. More recently, builds like this one that have been top ending Legion eschewing that Stature Black Bolt package for a little bit of location interaction, with varying different cards at the bottom end of the curve have been seeing success as well. The kind of core key parts of this archetype in my mind are the Zabu, along with the Darkhawk Rock Slide, and then Shang-Chi Enchantress tech card package. This build choosing leaning on tech cards even a little bit more, leveraging Killmonger and Luke Cage as other cards that can be good counterplay into a variety of things. I think Killmonger in particular can be nice at cleaning up a lot of the stones that Thanos players are putting into play, which is one of the reasons why I think this archetype in general is well positioned. Darkhawk in particular, since it gets larger based on the size of your opponent's deck, is somewhat a natural predator to the Thanos archetype, which is starting with 18 cards instead of Marvel Snap's normal 12. If you're someone that prefers being proactive when you play a card game like Marvel Snap, you just want to be linear and put big numbers into play as opposed to reacting to what your opponents are doing, I think some variation of Shuri is definitely the best thing to be doing in that realm as we head on into this Infinity Conquest week. There's a lot of variations of this archetype, such as this one on the screen now, as well as this other variation that I'm particular to that's still leveraging Kitty Pryde. I think this build is still good post Kitty Pryde nerf in my experience. experience. I think one of the big decisions to kind of make when you're thinking about this archetype in general is, do you want to be playing a top end like She-Hulk that's flexible into a variety of matchups, albeit is a little bit weak into the lockout decks that are seeing play, or you can choose to play something like Vision that gives you flexibility to move into flooded locations and Spider-Man paths after the fact that your opponent thinks could otherwise be safe. To make a little bit of a called shot speculation heading into the Infinity Conquest week here, I would bet we're going to see a resurgence in high evolutionary decks. These archetypes, while their play rates have plummeted after Wasp and Hulk got adjusted, are still putting up very good win rates. And this is very typical when we see a card, or cards in this case, get nerfed. People just kind of put aside their toy that's worse than it was previously, expecting it to not be good enough. And it takes them a while to come back around to playing with that after exploring new things. With Infinity Conquest, a lot of people are going to be pushed to find decks that are powerful, that they're also comfortable with. And I think we're going to see a lot of people that had a lot of repetition in with these various high evolutionary archetypes pick them back up and realize that their win rate is still very good, and they're going to increase in popularity. This particular variation is a fairly stock Lockjaw variation of high evolutionary, but there are also a few other high Evo decks that are seeing success per Untapped stats right now as well. The high evolutionary deck on Untapped right now with the best stats, actually this toxic high evolutionary variation. And I think part of this deck's success is actually related to the fact that high evolutionary is less popular than it was before. This is a deck that really gets shut down by opposing copies of Luke Cage. And because high evo is flying a little bit under the radar right now, there's less copies of that in players' decks than there have been in the last month or more. It is noteworthy that this particular build is choosing to play Rogue as well as a way to have some interaction with opposing Luke Cages, but that's not always going to line up perfectly for you, and it's going to give you some pretty strict timing / sequencing thing that'll make some of your other plays awkward. The final high evo list that's been doing well inside of Conquest, has done well in some community tournaments, is a personal favorite variation of mine, and that's the Moon Girl double up deck. Not only are you looking to double up She-Hulks in this deck, but on the back of Quinjet and Magic, you could even play double Taco Hulks out over the course of the game. I think Armor and Cosmo are phenomenal, not only as things to protect our own cards from things like Shang-Chi, but they also double as proactive disruption into destroy decks that have remained popular despite only having average performance in their win rate so far. To close out today's Infinity Quest deck roundup, we have one that has a smaller metagame percentage, but has strong numbers on Untapped.gg in that smaller percentage, and it's a personal favorite of mine, this Kitty Pryde Angela interactive good cards archetype, essentially. This particular build is looking to leverage Daredevil in tandem with Professor X and Spider-Man to leverage some lockout elements, while then trying to win one of the other paths by either growing up an Angela and a Kitty Pryde, or countering whatever your opponent has deployed there with our own tech cards like Shang-Chi and Enchantress. If you're not partial to playing lockout variations, but you like the idea of a deck like this variation that's playing a small movement package at the bottom end of the curve, I think is also quite good. This one plays to the board a little bit more proactively, and then uses other things like Jean and Polaris to disrupt the opponent in the early game, as opposed to trying to lane lock them in the late game turns. Hopefully today's video helps you feel a little bit more prepared heading into your own Infinity Conquest runs to do battle to unlock that cosmetic avatar border. Personally, I'm going to be favoring things like those kitty control decks that I featured at the very end of the video, and perhaps that Moon Girl Hulk double up deck, since those are some of my personal favorites. I've also got a couple of pocket picks that don't quite have the metrics on Untapped as of yet to measure up to include in a video like this, but I think they have a lot of potential. I would love to know what you intend to do battle with in a comment down below. And as always, if you enjoyed my musings on this topic, be sure to snap that like button to help this video reach some more people, and consider dropping by my Twitch stream later tonight, 5 p.m. Central at twitch.tv/Jeff Hogan. We'll be doing battle in Marvel Snap's Conquerors. Let's get snapping.